The moment my father introduced me to his friends as the other one, my chest tightened so fiercely I thought I might collapse right there. The room spun for a second. Laughter, polite nods, clinking glasses, but all I could hear was the echo of those words. My name, Karen, buried beneath a careless label like I was some forgotten accessory to his pride. I forced a smile, the kind that hides 1,000 bruises, and nodded along as if it didn't sting. This was supposed to be my moment, my baby shower, a day to celebrate the new life I was bringing into the world. But instead, I was just the other one in my own family. I glanced toward Piper, my oldest friend. She offered a smile that looked warm, but there was always that flicker, a subtle edge, that I couldn't quite place. Piper had been there through everything, or so I thought. I wanted to trust that today, at least, she stood solidly by my side. Yet, a whisper of doubt lurked beneath her cheerfulness, like a shadow lurking just out of sight. I reminded myself of the secret I kept close to my chest. The house, paid for with my sweat and late-night shifts, was legally mine. I've never felt the need to brandish it like a weapon. Maybe one day, family love would catch up to the sacrifices I'd made. For now, I clung to hope and the polished smile I wore like armor. Growing up, I was always the quiet one, the invisible thread holding the family fabric together without anyone really noticing. While my sister Michelle basked in the spotlight, I hovered in the wings, quietly doing the work that kept everything from unraveling. My 8 years as a pediatric nurse taught me patience and tenderness, but they also mirrored the emotional labor I carried at home. I was the steady hand, the calming voice, the one who kept the fractured pieces from falling apart. Yet, my family rarely acknowledged this. I was the dependable shadow, the silent provider who did her duty without complaint, her worth dissolving into the background noise of their lives. Today, as I held my swollen belly and smiled through the conversations, I felt the familiar ache of being overlooked. The air around me buzzed with chatter, the scent of fresh flowers mingling with the faint aroma of baby powder from the gifts stacked nearby. I wanted to believe this celebration could be mine, that maybe the people I loved would see me, truly see me, for once. But the sting of my father's words clung to my skin like an invisible bruise. Somewhere deep inside, a small voice whispered that this wasn't just a slip, it was a pattern. Yet I pushed it down, told myself to breathe, to hold on to the fragile hope that this family would one day recognize the woman doing everything to keep it together. I still remember that Christmas dinner, years ago, like a snapshot etched in my mind with sharp edges. The tree shimmered with lights, but the warmth in the room was thin, fragile. I had spent weeks carefully crafting a gift for my parents, a scrapbook filled with memories and heartfelt notes. My hands trembled when I handed it over, eyes wide with hope for a spark of appreciation. Instead, all I got was polite nods and silence. Across the table, Michelle was showered with praise, her expensive gifts admired and admired again. "Our golden child," my father whispered in awe, his eyes gleaming as he spoke only to her. I swallowed the lump of disappointment, the ache settling deep in my chest. My mother's casual dismissal hit harder. "You just don't understand how to make yourself stand out," she said, barely looking up from her plate. I wanted to cry, wanted to scream that I was trying, that I had always tried. But instead, I nodded and swallowed the bitter pill of rejection. Later that night, I overheard my father on the phone, a careless comment about me being the quiet one. The label stung more than he could know, a weight I carried silently ever since. I told myself it was tough love, a family quirk, a phase that would pass, but the truth settled in my heart like a shadow, shaping the way I saw myself, invisible, unremarkable, a shadow beside the spotlight. Those early wounds have never fully healed. They haunt me in quiet moments and flash sharply when I least expect it. Piper, my supposed best friend, knows these cracks all too well. She doesn't visit scars with kindness. Instead, she whispers doubts into Michelle's ear, playing on my invisibility. "Is Karen really as reliable as she seems?" Piper murmurs, planting tiny seeds of mistrust. It's subtle, almost invisible, but it eats away at the fragile trust I build. Meanwhile, I quietly bear the weight of my family's burdens. For 5 years, I've paid $200 every month toward the mortgage, kept the lights on, and filled the gaps no one else would. I covered $15,000 in medical bills for my mother, juggling night shifts and canceled vacations to keep us afloat. Daniel, my husband, watches with concern. "Are they appreciating what you do?" he asks gently, worry creasing his brow. I shake my head, but I smile anyway. "I just want peace," I whisper, more to myself than to him. The house, the one tangible thing that's mine, rests quietly on my name. It's a secret power, a shield I don't dare brandish because I'm afraid of what it would mean to use it. For now, I choose endurance over confrontation, silence over conflict. The people in my life, my family, Piper, Daniel, Michelle, and Robert, each play their part in this tangled web, and I'm the axis on which it all turns, unnoticed and unthanked. The summer barbecue was supposed to be a laid-back gathering, a chance for families to mingle and relax. Instead, it became a crucible. Piper, smiling sweetly as always, dropped a comment that landed like a slap. "She's always just the backup plan, you know?" Her voice was light, almost joking, but the room shifted. Daniel's colleagues exchanged glances, laughter bubbled awkwardly, and the warmth drained from my chest. I felt the sting, a flush creeping up my neck, but I forced a small smile. "She must be stressed," I whispered to Daniel, trying to convince myself as much as him. I wanted to disappear, to slip away and hide from the humiliation. For a few moments, I stepped outside, the midsummer heat wrapping around me like a suffocating blanket. I took deep breaths, the scent of grilled meat and freshly cut grass mingling with my pounding heartbeat. When I returned, I carried a quiet resolve, a refusal to break completely, to crumble in front of them. Piper's satisfied smirk caught my eye, a silent victory that stung more than her words. The laughter had died down, but the damage lingered in the room, in the weight of their gazes. Doubt crept in like a slow poison, whispering that maybe this would never be the family where I belonged. Yet, I held on to that fragile thread of hope, the one that told me to keep standing, keep fighting in my own quiet way. After the barbecue, the subtle undercurrents of tension only deepened. Piper's smile, so seemingly innocent, masked a deliberate campaign. I started hearing whispers. "Karen's too sensitive. She's making mountains out of molehills." At family dinners, those murmurs floated around the table like smoke, twisting my words and silencing my protests before they began. Michelle, once my closest sister, began pulling away. She no longer sought my company. Her laughter diminished whenever I spoke. I caught her eye once, a flicker of uncertainty that quickly vanished when Piper sidled up to her, whispering with that practiced charm that always seemed so effortless. They were turning the family into a fortress I was locked out of. One evening, after a particularly strained dinner, Michelle leaned in, her voice low and hesitant. "Maybe you need to stop making everything such a big deal, Karen. It's like you're always looking for problems." The words stabbed deeper than she knew, but I forced myself to nod, swallowing the hurt. Piper's gaslighting reached even further. She told mutual friends, "Karen's always been jealous of Michelle. She's just projecting her insecurities." Those words echoed relentlessly in my mind. Was I the one losing perspective? Maybe I was overreacting, too sensitive, the problem everyone claimed. But the exhaustion gnawing at my core was real. Still, I refused to vanish into silence. If anything, I clung harder to the hope that one day, someone would see through the fog Piper was weaving and understand the truth beneath the whispers. I tried to steady myself, reminding myself that my worth wasn't measured by their approval. Yet every whispered comment and sideways glance hollowed me out a little more. The family network that once felt like a safety net was tightening into a noose. I caught myself questioning my own memories, wondering if I'd imagined kindness in moments that had been cold all along. But deep down, I knew the fractures were real, cracks spreading beneath the surface of forced smiles and muted silences. Desperation began to creep in. I longed for an anchor, a way to stop this relentless erosion. Piper's manipulation wasn't just a game anymore. It was a siege, and I was the lonely fortress under attack. Despite the confusion and the pain, I refused to retreat completely. The fight was exhausting, but giving up meant losing even the faintest glimmer of hope that things could change. So, I held on, fragile, weary, but unbroken, waiting for a chance to speak my truth. Determined to stop the mounting isolation, I gathered my courage and requested a family meeting. I invited Robert, Michelle, and Piper to sit down, hoping calm conversation might bridge the growing divide. The air in the living room was thick with unspoken tension as I began, voice steady but heart pounding, outlining everything. The mortgage payments I'd shouldered for years, the medical bills I'd covered, the emotional labor no one acknowledged. I spoke plainly, hoping facts would cut through the fog of misunderstanding. But almost immediately, Piper's eyes glistened with fake tears. Her voice quivered as she accused me of trying to ruin family harmony, twisting my concerns into a threat. It was a performance perfected over years, and I was caught off guard. Robert, leaning back in his chair, shrugged dismissively. "Karen, you're reading too much into things." His words hit like a slap, cold and dismissive. I fought the urge to explain further, but the older cousin who was supposed to mediate sided with them, brushing off my feelings as overly sensitive. The room closed in around me, walls heavy with disbelief and judgment. I left that gathering hollow, the goodwill I'd brought shattered under their weight of rejection. Their dismissal wasn't just a misunderstanding, it was a declaration that my pain was irrelevant. I sat alone in my car afterward, the engine humming softly, but my mind was loud with swirling doubts. Had I truly overreacted? Was I the problem they insisted I was? The ache of loneliness settled deep, sharper than before. Yet beneath the doubt, a stubborn ember of clarity burned. This wasn't about me reading too much. It was manipulation, carefully choreographed to keep me isolated, to silence the one voice daring to speak for itself. That meeting marked a turning point. The illusion that peace was still within reach cracked irrevocably, leaving me to face the growing divide alone. The holiday party at work was supposed to be a reprieve, a night to celebrate with colleagues and friends. Instead, it became the stage for the most devastating betrayal yet. Piper, ever so subtle behind her polished smile, began hinting at things best kept private. My struggles with postpartum depression, the financial strain I'd kept hidden from everyone. Her words were cold and calculated. Maybe Karen isn't as put together as she pretends. Whispers rippled through the crowd, eyes darting my way with a mix of pity and judgment. I felt the weight of their gazes like icy needles piercing through me. Daniel stood by helplessly, his expression a mix of anger and sorrow as he watched me crumble under the scrutiny. I could barely hold back tears as I tried to steady my voice amid the murmurs. The humiliation was raw and suffocating, eroding the confidence I'd built over years of hard work. The aftermath was tangible and cruel. My supervisor approached me days later with thinly veiled skepticism, questioning my reliability. A promotion I'd been promised, a chance to finally step forward professionally, was suddenly postponed without explanation. It felt like a punch to the gut, the confirmation that Piper's actions were not careless slip-ups, but deliberate sabotage. The personal pain was compounded by the very real consequences. My reputation, my career trajectory, my self-esteem, all under assault. The line Piper crossed that night was no longer invisible. It was glaring and brutal, a wound that refused to heal quietly. The next day, in a moment of fragile vulnerability, I reached out to Piper. I needed to try to bridge the widening chasm before it became an unbridgeable gulf. I offered a heartfelt apology if my actions had unintentionally hurt her, and suggested counseling, some space where we could untangle the mess we'd become. I spelled out my needs plainly: respect, honesty, and support. I even offered to help Michelle with her looming college expenses, hoping to ease the tension that Piper seemed to relish stoking. But Piper's response was ice cold, delivered with a smirk that sliced through me. "I don't need your drama," she said, voice sharp and dismissive. That smirk wasn't just rejection, it was a calculated dismissal, a message that she had no intention of mending the fractures she'd caused. I watched helplessly as she twisted my offer, using it to deepen the rift between Michelle and me. Rumors spread like wildfire, and the fragile threads of family loyalty unraveled further. Standing there, Facing her rejection, the truth settled like a heavy stone in my chest. This was no misunderstanding, no mistake. This was choice, a deliberate decision to push me out and tear me down. I whispered to myself in the silence that followed. I did everything I could. The weight of that final rejection pressed down, crushing but clarifying. The fight was no longer just about family or friendship. It was about survival, holding on to my dignity in the face of cold betrayal. The fallout was swift and brutal, like a storm tearing through whatever fragile ground I'd managed to stand on. Piper's poison seeped into every corner of the extended family. Her accusations that I was playing the victim, whispered with such conviction, they sounded like truth. At the next family gathering, I felt the shift immediately. Eyes that once met mine with warmth now held a cool reserve. Michelle's distancing was the sharpest cut. She no longer greeted me with her usual tentative smile. Instead, she leaned into Piper, laughing softly at some joke I wasn't part of. It was as if I had become a ghost in the room, invisible and irrelevant. Daniel's concern weighed heavy on me. "Karen, you're retreating," he said quietly one night as we sat in our dimly lit living room. His voice was gentle, but the worry beneath it was unmistakable. I nodded, though I was too drained to explain why. The exhaustion was overwhelming, like wading through quicksand, every effort to reach out swallowed by the very people I'd tried to connect with. Doubt gnawed at my insides, relentless. Was I really the problem? Had my need to be seen and appreciated become some unbearable burden to them? The self-doubt was suffocating, tightening its grip with every silence and sideways glance. Alone in the quiet of our home, I replayed the conversations, the laughter that didn't include me, the subtle exclusions, my identity as the family's caregiver. The woman who had held everything together quietly for years was unraveling. It was terrifying to watch that role slip through my fingers, replaced by a hollow void where warmth and recognition should have been. I felt stripped down to my core, exposed and vulnerable. The silence around me was deafening. No comforting voices, no reassurances, just the cold echo of abandonment. I wanted to scream, to demand they see me, but the words caught in my throat like a bitter poison. Daniel stayed by my side, a steady presence in a world that was suddenly foreign and hostile. His quiet support was the slender thread keeping me tethered to reality. Yet, even his hope felt fragile, as if he too feared that the people I once called family were slipping permanently out of reach. I lay awake at night, heart heavy, questioning everything I'd believed about loyalty and love. The weight of isolation pressed down on me, and in the darkest corners of my mind, a terrifying thought surfaced. Maybe I had been wrong all along. Maybe I was the one who didn't belong. When I looked in the mirror, the reflection was a stranger. The woman staring back had tired eyes, shadows etched beneath them from sleepless nights spent wrestling with doubt. I wanted to believe in myself still, but the relentless rejection was eroding that foundation. My hands trembled as I touched my face, searching for a spark of the woman I used to be. The fight inside me flickered weakly, nearly extinguished by the cold reality settling over my life. For the first time, I felt truly alone, standing at the bottom of a well where light barely reached, wondering if I could ever climb back up. 2 years after that humiliating baby shower, life took a cruel, unexpected turn. I received a call that shattered any fragile hope left inside me. My father, Robert, needed a liver transplant, and I was the only match. The prospect of saving his life felt like a heavy, unwanted mantle. At the hospital, surrounded by sterile white walls and the hum of machines, I sat through the meeting with doctors and family, the air thick with tension and unspoken history. Robert, sitting beside me, seemed distant, his gaze drifting past me instead of meeting my eyes. When he spoke, it wasn't with gratitude or remorse, but with the cold detachment of a man who had long forgotten how to be a father. He brushed aside our estrangement like a trivial inconvenience, making no effort to thank me for the sacrifice I was about to make. Worse still, while sorting through hospital paperwork, a cruel discovery hit me like a punch to the gut. Robert had secretly siphoned $50,000 from my inheritance to cover his debts. The money bypassed me entirely. No warning, No conversation. It was a betrayal etched in cold numbers, a financial stab that underscored a lifetime of neglect. The man who had called me the other one now expected me to save him without a shred of appreciation. That moment crystallized something inside me. The veil of hope and forgiveness lifted, revealing a hard, unforgiving truth. My heart, already battered and bruised, hardened like stone. The years of silent sacrifice, the endless giving without acknowledgement, suddenly felt like chains I was done carrying. The man who had forgotten my name, who had never truly seen me, was asking for a piece of my body. In that sterile hospital room, beneath the harsh fluorescent lights, I felt the fragile remnants of hope die a quiet death. It was replaced by a cold clarity, a chilling realization that I could no longer pour myself out for those who regarded me as nothing more than an obligation. The anger simmered just beneath the surface, a quiet storm gathering strength. I remember the sterile scent of antiseptic, the faint beeping of monitors, and the way my hands clenched into fists as I stared at the papers in front of me. The room felt suffocating, the walls closing in as the weight of betrayal settled deep in my bones. I glanced at Robert, who continued to speak in a tone that barely masked indifference, and I saw not the father I once looked up to, but a stranger, cold, demanding, and ungrateful. The fracture in our relationship was no longer just emotional, it was irrevocable. I took a deep breath, the air sharp in my lungs, and whispered to myself, no more. Later, alone in the hospital chapel, the quiet enveloped me like a shroud. I sat on the hard wooden pew, the polished surface worn smooth by countless prayers, feeling the weight of years pressing down. Tears I hadn't allowed myself to shed spilled silently, mixing grief with rage. I thought about every time my generosity had been met with disdain or oblivion, every slight Piper and Robert had inflicted like cruel reminders of my place in their world. The illusions I'd clung to, hope for recognition, forgiveness, belonging, crumbled beneath the harsh light of reality. The pain was sharp, but beneath it, a fierce anger began to burn. That anger was a strange, fierce sort of awakening. It pushed through the fog of sorrow, clearing my vision. I counted the wounds, the betrayals, the endless giving met with nothing but coldness. This is how they've always seen me, I told myself, voice trembling but resolute. I just didn't want to see it. For the first time, I acknowledged the pattern that had kept me trapped. The invisible woman, the family's silent caretaker, the one who was taken for granted and discarded. But the grief was giving way to something stronger, a vow. Never again would I let myself be invisible. Never again would I sacrifice my peace for their neglect. In that quiet chapel, with the low hum of distant voices in the hospital corridors, I felt a shift deep inside. The grief was still there, raw and unyielding, but it was now tempered by a cold steel of resolve. I grasped the secret power I held, the ownership of the family home, the tangible proof that I was more than just the woman they overlooked. It was a lever, a tool I'd kept hidden out of fear and loyalty. Now, it felt like a weapon, a means to reclaim some fragment of control in a life that had been dominated by loss and betrayal. I whispered the words over and over in my mind, never again. That evening, Daniel and I sat together in the quiet of our kitchen, the soft glow of the lamp casting long shadows across the table. I shared with him the weight I'd been carrying, the cold clarity that now defined my feelings toward the family. I'm done being the doormat, I said quietly, the words tasting like both liberation and bitterness. I told him my plan, not one born from anger, but from careful calculation. No more financial bailouts, no more emotional labor, no more favors that went unappreciated. It was time to step back, to protect myself. Daniel listened intently, his hand reaching across to steady mine, a silent promise of support. He warned me gently to guard my heart, to be cautious not to burn bridges I might still need. But there was strength in his voice too, a quiet encouragement that I hadn't allowed myself to feel in a long time. We spoke about Piper, not just as a friend turned toxic, but as the root of so much pain. Naming her was painful, but necessary. It focused my energy, gave me a clear target for the change I needed to make. Together, we began to gather papers, evidence of all the unacknowledged sacrifices and betrayals. The process was methodical, deliberate, and for the first time, I felt the stirrings of control. As we worked, I shed the last remnants of the victim I had been. The woman who always gave without question was fading, replaced by someone quieter, but far stronger. It wasn't revenge I sought, not yet, but survival and dignity. The strategic mindset took hold, steady and sure. I felt something I hadn't in years. Hope. Not the fragile hope that everything would magically mend, but a fierce, determined hope that I would no longer be invisible or powerless. I was preparing, not just to defend myself, but to finally stand tall in a world that had long tried to diminish me. I sat at the kitchen table with stacks of papers spread before me, the dim light casting long shadows across the cluttered surface. Each document was a thread in the tangled web I'd been living in, and now I was unraveling it with a feverish intensity. The mortgage statements confirmed the $1,200 I'd been paying every month, a burden I bore silently to keep the house, our shared home, afloat. My eyes scanned the rows of numbers detailing the $15,000 in medical bills I'd fronted, mostly for Robert's care. I traced my finger down the columns, feeling the sting of every sacrifice I'd made. But beyond the money, the invisible debts weighed heavier. The late-night calls from Michelle, the endless family gatherings I'd organized to keep peace, my role as the mediator when emotions ran too high. I reached for my phone and dialed the attorney I'd found through a mutual contact. She was sharp, professional, and immediately understood the gravity of my position. Her voice was steady as she explained the leverage my ownership of the house afforded me. It wasn't just a roof over our heads. It was legal power I'd been blind to. "Karen," she said firmly, "you have the means to hold your ground. This isn't just about property. It's about your standing in the family." I felt a flicker of something I hadn't allowed before: control. The attorney advised me to document everything, every interaction, every financial exchange, and any evidence of Piper's manipulation. I felt a cold determination settle in my chest. Back at the table, I pulled up old text messages, scrolling through conversations laced with subtle digs and half-truths Piper had sent, the messages Michelle forwarded, the veiled accusations Robert made when he needed money. I began compiling a dossier, a record of betrayals masked as casual remarks and financial abuse disguised as family support. I cataloged Piper's mounting debts, Robert's dependency on my help, and Michelle's fragile social anxieties that Piper exploited to their advantage. The stark reality hit me hard. They need me more than I need them. That phrase echoed in my mind like a mantra. For the first time, my power felt tangible, a force I could wield deliberately. The invisible skeleton of my family's reliance on me was undeniable, and I was no longer willing to be the unseen backbone. The ledger of my sacrifices had become my ammunition. As the night deepened, I sat back and exhaled slowly, tasting the bittersweet mix of sorrow and strength. I was no longer just the caretaker. I was the one holding the cards. This realization wasn't comforting. It was a call to action. The quiet that filled the room was heavy but necessary. I was mapping out my future, inch by inch, document by document, and for the first time in years, I felt the weight of possibility pressing against my ribs instead of the crushing burden of neglect. The family's dependencies were clear, their vulnerabilities laid bare. In this moment, I was no longer their invisible caretaker. I was a force to be reckoned with. Over the next few days, I moved with deliberate precision. Passwords on joint accounts were changed under the guise of routine security updates. I informed my attorney of the family's toxic undercurrents without revealing too much, just enough to ensure I had legal counsel ready. Every interaction with Piper and the others was measured, my voice calm and steady as I maintained the facade of my usual generosity. I smiled through family dinners, laughed at anecdotes, and answered calls with warmth. None of them suspected the storm gathering beneath my composed exterior. The tension was palpable to me, though invisible to them. A taut wire stretched tight in my chest. Daniel watched me quietly, sensing the shift without pressing. "You're doing all the right things," he said softly one evening as we stood in the kitchen. "But remember to breathe." His gentle reminder was a balm against the rising storm inside me. I nodded, thanking him with a glance that conveyed more than words could. Each night, I carefully reviewed my plans, shielding my intentions behind a calm smile. The house felt different somehow, a cage and a fortress all at once. I savored this eerie calm, knowing it was the quiet before the upheaval. The pieces were moving into place, and I was an unseen player controlling the board. The facade was perfect. No one saw the ticking bomb beneath the surface, and for now, that was exactly how it had to be. Then, late one night as I combed through old emails for any overlooked threads, I stumbled across something that froze me in place. A hidden chain of messages between Piper and Michelle. Their words were a cold revelation, detailed plans to undermine me, orchestrated sabotage of my reputation, manipulations aimed at turning Robert against me, and schemes to redirect family resources away from me. The shock was like a physical blow, an icy fist clenching my ribs. Piper, my oldest friend, and Michelle, my sister, colluding in secrecy behind my back for over a year. The betrayal was absolute and staggering. My voice caught in my throat as I read their calculated cruelty, the depth of deception unfolding like a blackened flower. I sank back into my chair, the weight of isolation crushing down harder than ever. The family I'd protected, the people I'd trusted, were not just fracturing, they were united in their betrayal. My heart pounded, a storm of anger and grief swirling inside me. But beneath it all, a fierce clarity emerged. This wasn't just Piper's jealousy anymore. It was a coordinated front designed to erase me. The magnitude of their conspiracy intensified my resolve. The enemy wasn't one person. It was an alliance bred from envy and resentment, a web woven tightly around me. The veil of denial lifted completely, revealing the harsh truth. I was surrounded by a coalition determined to dismantle everything I'd built. Daniel's presence was a steady anchor as I shared the grim discovery with him the next morning. His eyes darkened with anger, but his voice remained calm. "We've been underestimating how deep this runs." His words echoed my own fears. Yet, amid the shock, a strategic fire ignited within me. I wasn't just justified in my withdrawal, I was compelled. The veil was lifted, and the path forward was clearer than ever. We began planning, silently but decisively. The cold betrayal had forged a new armor around my heart. I was no longer just defending myself. I was preparing to dismantle the fragile facade of trust they'd built on lies. This was no longer about hurt feelings. It was about survival and reclamation. The morning after that revelation, I made my first moves. The mortgage payment that had always left my account on the first of the month, it didn't go through. The stack of unpaid medical bills I'd always quietly covered sat untouched. I notified my bank and legal counsel, freezing Piper's and Michelle's access to shared accounts. When Piper called, her voice was casual, but I answered firmly, "I won't be covering any more expenses or debts." There was a sharp silence on the other end before she barked, "You can't do that, Karen. You owe us." I met her accusation with a steady calm. "I owe nothing. You've taken enough." Family gatherings grew colder as notices of late fees arrived, and quiet tensions thickened the air. Piper's usual social charm faltered under the strain of mounting creditor calls and slipping status, and I watched without guilt as the consequences took shape. Robert's reliance on me was now a liability he could no longer ignore. Through it all, Daniel remained my pillar, offering quiet encouragement. "This is just the beginning," he said, "but you're standing strong." His words fueled my resolve. I was no longer the invisible provider, the soft target. I was a woman setting boundaries, claiming my dignity, piece by piece. The storm had begun, and I was ready to face the chaos with a steady heart and unyielding purpose. The night was thick with tension. As the family gathered in the living room, I had meticulously prepared for this moment. The walls, once witnesses to laughter and shared stories, now felt heavy with unspoken truths. I stood calmly in front of everyone, Robert shifting uncomfortably beside Piper, who wore her usual mask of confidence, though I could see it flickering at the edges. Michelle sat quietly, her head bowed, shame creeping into her posture. I took a steadying breath and held up the first document, the deed to the house, officially in my name. The paper felt weightier than I expected, an undeniable symbol of the power I had claimed quietly beneath the surface of family dynamics. "I want to start with something clear," I said, my voice steady but resonant. This house, the home where we all gather, belongs to me. The mortgage has been paid by my account every single month, not by anyone else's. And those debts you think I'm responsible for? I covered those too. I allowed a pause, scanning their faces as the slow realization settled in. I pulled out the financial statements, the unpaid medical bills, the credit card balances. Their eyes flicked between the papers and me, disbelief and discomfort mingling. I have proof of every payment, every effort I've made to keep this family afloat financially. No more silent sacrifices. Then I brought out the emails between Piper and Michelle, their carefully concealed correspondence laid bare in black and white. The room seemed to inhale sharply, the air thick with betrayal. These messages, I continued, show the orchestration of manipulation, attempts to isolate me, to turn you all against me. Piper's confident smile faltered, her eyes darkening with the first cracks of panic. Michelle's cheeks flushed crimson, and she avoided my gaze. Robert's hands clenched into fists at his sides, his mouth opening and closing without words. I could feel the weight of the silence crashing down, the shift undeniable. "I'm done being invisible," I said, my voice firmer now, cutting through the quiet like a blade. "From this moment, I'm setting boundaries. No more financial bailouts, no more emotional blackmail. I expect respect, not just in words, but in how we treat each other moving forward. Betrayal has consequences." The room was still, heavy with the impact of my words. I saw the power reversal taking shape. Where once I had been overlooked, now all eyes were on me. As I looked around the circle of family and friends, I realized I was no longer standing alone. The moment was mine, radiant and unyielding. After the meeting, the consequences rippled through the days that followed like a storm unleashed. Piper's debts, once invisible or ignored, became glaring and impossible to avoid. The relentless calls from creditors echoed through the house, the walls seeming to close in with every demand. Invitations to social events dwindled, whispers trailing her like shadows in the wake of her unraveling reputation. I watched, detached but not unsympathetic, as the web of her social standing frayed. Michelle, too, found herself isolated, strained friendships pulling away as whispers about her part in the betrayal spread quietly among relatives. Robert came to me one afternoon, his eyes tired and ached with the weight of reality finally settling in. "Karen, I understand now that you won't be covering my expenses anymore," he said, voice low, regret coloring his words. The awkwardness was palpable. "I have to take responsibility for my own mess." For once, I saw the man who had always depended on me confronted by the consequences of his choices. I nodded, the familiar ache of disappointment softened by a glimmer of hope. This was the turning point, for all of us. Piper's desperate messages flooded in, love bombing disguised as remorse and pleas for forgiveness. I read them calmly, my resolve a shield. I'm not that person anymore, I thought. I owe no promises. Some family members who had once turned away began to approach with quiet apologies, their eyes reflecting shame and uncertainty. I listened, acknowledging their regret without opening doors that had been closed for good. The tide was shifting. Piper's carefully controlled narrative crumbled as truth took root. Slowly, the foundations of her influence decayed, leaving her stranded in the cold aftermath. I felt no glee, only the steady calm that comes from standing firm when it matters most. The family's fractured pieces lay before us, raw and exposed, but I was no longer the one to piece them back together at my own expense. Piper's descent into desperation was swift and sharp. When her initial attempts at charm failed, she escalated to threats, legal action, accusations of betrayal hurled at me in public settings, emotional blackmail wielded like a weapon. She rallied relatives, flying monkeys sent to pressure me into compliance. Yet, amid the mounting pressure, I remained unshaken, fortified by legal counsel and the unwavering support of Daniel at my side. Each call, each message, each attempt to manipulate only reinforced my resolve. I met threats with calm, accusations with silence, and attempts at coercion with firm boundaries. Some in the family, seeing her unraveling, came forward with genuine remorse. Their apologies were cautious, sincere, but I kept them at arm's length. Forgiveness was not my goal. Self-preservation was. Piper's mask was shattered, leaving the woman behind exposed and powerless. The isolation that followed was complete. No longer did she hold sway over our lives or hearts. Watching her retreat into the shadows, I felt the weight of years of neglect lift from my shoulders. The battle had been fierce, but it had revealed the truth and restored my dignity. I was no longer the pawn in their game. I was a player, strong and steady. 6 months later, the sense of peace in my life was profound and quietly victorious. The house was truly mine, secure, a sanctuary rather than a battleground. My finances were stable for the first time in years, and emotional boundaries, once blurred and broken, now stood firm and clear. Daniel remained my steadfast ally, his presence a quiet comfort built on trust and shared strength. Contact with Piper and Michelle was limited, strictly managed by me. I no longer sought their approval or validation. Those needs had long since drained away. Robert and I had settled into a distant but civil relationship, the past acknowledged but not revisited. Sitting on the porch one evening, the cool breeze brushing the leaves around me, I reflected on how far I'd come. The pain was still there, an undercurrent beneath the surface, but it no longer defined me. I realized with a quiet smile, I don't miss the approval I never had. That truth felt liberating, a final shedding of old chains. Peace, I understood now, was worth more than any fractured family bond or hollow praise. My future lay ahead, shaped by self-respect and hard-earned boundaries. As the sun dipped below the horizon, I looked forward with a steady heart, ready to live a life defined by choice, not compromise.